So that is also a very vague way to figure out where Forrest Fenn wanted to die, just from interviews and stuff. And yet Jack would have us believe that's how he figured it out. That's how he figured out the location. Now, the strange thing about the way Jack did this was that he went back, he figured out the location. I'm going to speak for myself, okay? I figured out the location on however many times I went out there. I think maybe when I was in Montana, I went to the same area twice in Three Forks area. But generally speaking, when I would go to a location, I really believed I knew where I was going. And so it was only the Three Forks solve at the very end that I actually knew where I was going to go, right to the point of pinpointing the treasure. It was under this constantly reoccurring thing of driftwood that occurred on the side of a river. I could go back through the photos, satellite photos, and see that it was always there. It was always being added to, and I thought, wow, well, that's a long story. Let's not get into it. It turned out that wasn't the right place anyway. But the bottom line of what I'm trying to say is, whenever I had a location, and other people had locations, you could go read various accounts of people that had locations that they were absolutely sure of. And I think Barb Anderson was someone that kept hammering away in New Mexico at her spot. But the vast majority of us, I don't know what's up with Barb, by the way. Barb, my financial advisor, is always bringing you up. I hope he doesn't mind my saying that. He's a happily married man. It has nothing to do with that. I'm just saying, I wonder what Barb's up to. Because he whatever. He'd love to know what you're up to. But anyway, the thing with the location is, most people, if they had a location, they would go out there one time. I mean, like in my particular case, I would go out for 3 or 4 days and stay in one area, stay in a hotel and go keep hammering that one area. I could see doing that one day, two. I mean, Jack went on 25 separate trips. That's a lot of money to keep traveling back and forth from the eastern part of the United States to the Rocky Mountains 25 times. This is a guy who had student loans. This is a guy who said he was worried about providing for his family. He had written for The Onion and done other stuff in the past, and he had made some good money doing some really cerebral thing with, I forget what it was, some sort of triage, foreign investment, triage analysis of the foreign investments, and he got into that market and made good money. As he said, he's definitely not a stupid guy, that's for sure. He's a very smart guy. But again, it goes back to this concept that could anyone really figure this out on any level? Because it seemed like such a Rorschach test no matter how you approached it. But the point I'm trying to make is, for Jack to go back to this location 25 trips, that means that location's right. I mean, if Forrest Fenn hasn't told you to go to this location and then you're on your own, you have to find it. If Forrest Fenn and I had any kind of communication where he said, you know what, Eric, I think you're the closest, and for my own personal reasons, I want this treasure found because I don't want the treasure going on after, say, I died, and of course he knows he's going to die. I don't want my family dealing with the headaches and the heartaches of people trying to break in and stalking and, all of the suing and all that stuff. There were 2 lawsuits going on that we know now were pretty frivolous, but they were there still, and Fenn had to deal with lawsuits and all that. All of the headaches that treasure hunt was causing. If Fenn was going to die, everybody agrees he would probably want to see that treasure hunt ended before he died, so his family would be off the hook as far as dealing with it. I could easily see him saying to someone, hey, I think you're the closest. I've seen some of the stuff you've said on the web, and here's the location. This is the area I'd like to die. Maybe even told Jack that if this happens. Everything's an opinion here, folks. Just my opinion. All of it's always just an opinion. Here's the location, but you're going to have to find it. Well, if Forrest Fenn told me that, I would go rent a cabin in that area and just stay there. Of course, I'm retired. I could do that. And just stay there until excuse me, until I found it. Jack, doing whatever he was doing at the time, had to keep going back and forth. Spent a lot of money and time and effort to keep going back and forth to that location. 25 times? What I was trying to get to earlier, and I kind of, as usual, kind of went off and rambled a bit. For most treasure hunters, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Like I said, Barb was out there, maybe still is hammering it. I think she did get to Santa Fe. So, you know, I could see someone going back, if you really were convinced, 10 times at the most, maybe? I mean, when you keep not finding it, it's very depressing and it's very self-defeating, and you really have to have almost a supernatural belief that you're right to do it. In my humble opinion, for me, I would have to have a absolute certainty beyond just figuring it out on my own. I would have to have an absolute certainty that I knew where that location, that treasure was in a certain location, to go back 25 times, as Jack said he did. And that would make sense if Forrest told him where the location was. The other theory is, and my financial advisor is big on this, and it's other people have thought of it, is that Jack, and this is just an opinion, that Jack hacked, or a group hacked, Fenn's computer. And the only thing they could determine with certainty was the location. They were never able to get the pinpoint. So again, you have a situation where you or a group of fellows who are hammering away at Fenn's and trying to figure out his computer and hack at its stuff. And it doesn't take much to a rat virus, as I said in one of my earlier videos. You can put a rat virus in a person's computer, and it can look for keystrokes, it can look for words, it can look at photos, it can do all sorts of stuff. And if you had a virus on there, Fenn was notorious for opening up emails and photos, especially if he thought girls' boobs were involved, apparently. Just saying, folks. And since Fenn had this predilection for opening up emails and photos and just getting his jollies, kind of following his own minor fame treasure hunt, that wasn't really smart if he was concerned about being hacked. And people have said, well, he had an IT guy look at it. Everyone else has 10 theories for everything you say. And so people, oh, you had an IT guy that was in charge of making sure he didn't get hacked. Yeah, okay, well, my theory is that he got hacked anyway, okay? They were better than the IT guy. If in fact, I mean, I know Fenn had a private detective, so to speak, a private eye. IT guy that caught all the hacks? I don't know. I don't think so. Somehow, the point is you have these two ideas. Fenn either told Jack where the location was, or Jack or someone hacked Fenn's computer and got the location, and Jack, with this knowledge, whether he's part of a group or did it on his own, just my opinion, of course, hacked location. Why else would someone keep going back 25 times? I mean, I'm sure Jack is a really smart guy, but I just think that kind of belief in your finding a location when you have no real proof and when you have no one there to verify it. I mean, let's take it from the other point of view. Jack doesn't really follow the poem. He kind of follows it to some extent, but he said he didn't really rely on the poem. He just watches Fenn's interviews. He reads what Fenn says. He looks at what other people say about Fenn. He determines what people are doing wrong and tries not to duplicate what searchers have done wrong. So he said that was kind of a way he did it. Hi, Bill. Hey, honey. That's my baby. Meow. You want to come up? It's a beautiful day here in Columbia, South Carolina. It's about 77 degrees. That's part of the reason my sister isn't here. She went back to her house on the other side of town to work in the yard all day because it's such a nice day out. So I'm pretty confident I can do this and I can get away with it. Whether I can edit today before she gets back, I don't know, but she'll be gone at some point in the future and I'll do the editing then in the living room. because right now I'm ensconced in the world famous Iwi Productions, IIWII Productions Studios. World famous. I've turned off both of my aquariums so you don't hear the bubbles, because I used to get complaints about that. Closed the blinds so the lighting is right. World famous studios. Very high tech. And so there you have it, the two theories about the location and the fact that Jack was either given the location by Fenn or the location was hacked. But the real telling thing, not to overdo this too much, is how in the world would anybody be that confident of their quote location? And even to go back, like you said, numerous times before numerous times, multitudes of times, before he figured out that he was in the right spot, but the blaze had been broken by natural forces. I mean, that's a real testimony to believing you're right about where Forrest Fenn's going to die just from watching and reading what Forrest has said, that you would go back 25 times. I think I've made my point. I think he had information that made him beyond sure. And like I said, if I had been given that information, whether I hacked someone, or which I never would, but if I hacked someone or they told me, I would have just simply gotten a motel room there and just stayed there till I found it. All right. Now, some of you are saying, Eric, this is all just theory, blah, blah, blah. Of course it is. Of course it is. Well, let me ask you this. If you're sitting out with this insane, I mean, there are some people who have an abnormal belief in Forrest Fenn's being this guy. He doesn't lie. He's almost like a Jesus figure for some people, because I read and I see the things on the net. I mean, Forrest Fenn robbed Indian graves, folks. He robbed Indian graves. He talks about Barry Goldwater, who was a senator, coming out when they were in a cave illegally looking for Indian artifacts, illegally, and Barry Goldwater shows up in a helicopter, and all of Forrest's friends go, "Oh my goodness, it's Barry Goldwater, we're busted." And he goes, "Oh no, he's here to look with us." He said, he's a senator, they make the laws, so he can do what he wants. Which is not really a cool viewpoint of your senators, and it's not really a very good conservative point if you consider yourself a conservative to think like that. Or, quite frankly, for a liberal either, they shouldn't think like that. This entire concept of the Senate and the presidency being above the people is a video for another time. This country's, well, okay, I'm not going to get started now. The point I'm trying to make is, though, Forrest Fenn's perfectly capable of lying. There are people that think the reason Forrest Fenn got investigated by the FBI over the Indian artifact trade in Santa Fe among all of the big Indian artifact dealers was, they think one of the reasons that Forrest got investigated and never charged was because he turned evidence on other dealers. Forrest Fenn is not liked by a lot of people, folks. I found that out as the years went by. There were other artifact people that couldn't stand Forrest Fenn. You don't get a reputation like that just being a really nice, honest guy all the time. Forrest Fenn was perfectly capable of lying. Perfectly capable of lying. Another point, Jack says Forrest never wanted the location to be known. Let's remember how much Jack revised history after Forrest died. Before Forrest died, he didn't even congratulate Jack. He congratulated all the searchers when the treasure was found. Remember? But he did not. But he did not congratulate Jack. People picked up on that and talked about it. I talked about it, others talked. It's weird. It's almost like you didn't even like the guy. Then he dies, and Jack tells the world, "We were best friends. He wanted me to come live near him. He wanted me to stay anonymous, but come live near him." That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Jack says Forrest didn't want that location to be known. So I can never tell you location, and I can't tell you the poem. I can't tell you how the poem works, because if I did, you'd figure out the location. If Forrest Fenn to his dying day didn't want that location, he didn't want that spot where the treasure was found to be known to the world. Forrest Fenn never said that before he died. If he did say it, he said the exact opposite at times too. He said, "Whatever the finder wants is fine with me. If the finder wants to disclose where it was, he can do it. If he wants to give up how the poem works, he can do it. Forrest Fenn said that. I'm not even going to bother showing you the quotes. You know he said that, if you know anything about this hunt. But then when Forrest Fenn dies, we get a completely revised history. Forrest never, ever wanted that location known. So I, Jack, I'm going to make sure that location's never known. And of course, in that way, never have to explain how I figured out where the treasure was found. It all works out really well for Jack, doesn't it? Here's something else you can think about when you think about the Fenn estate and Forrest Fenn and stuff. And again, this is just my theory. I have no way of knowing anything about this, but I had two, I have two searcher friends who contacted the Fenn estate about where the cancer money went from, I think, Too Far to Walk. Was that the book? It's either the first or the second book, right? It was one of the books. Forrest Fenn announced that 10% of the proceeds from one of the books was going to go to a cancer research fund or center, etc. So if you ever bought the book thinking that was happening, it's kind of a cool thought that you're going to get the book anyway, say. I don't think anyone actually went out and just bought the book because of that. But I think if you buy something, anytime it has anything to do with the earth environment, which is very precious to me, although I'm not radicalized. I mean, I was in the Sierra Club back in the 70s when I was a teenager. Or the late 60s, early 70s, or whatever. It was one of those things. Sierra Club, it was something where you'd actually send your check in the mail, snail mail, and then you'd get a pamphlet back 2 weeks later. It was great. I loved it. Back in the day when you would just wait for that mail to come in. Almost like the old days when people would have to wait for the wooden ship to come in to bring, spices. It took a month to get there and all that kind of stuff. I don't even regress. I just talk too much. But anyway, anytime you realize that by buying a product you're giving to some cause that is a good cause, it's kind of a nice feeling. And it should be a very innocent enterprise for that to happen, right? So this one guy, he's a very important member of the chase. Some of you don't really know of him, but he's a very important member of the chase. He's uncovered some stuff in the past, like people saying that Forrest Fenn told them the location or where the chest was before he died. But not Jack, someone else who apparently had nothing to do with retrieving each other, but it's just kind of interesting that Forrest was telling people where the treasure was. This guy brought that out and was right on about it. We now know. Well, anyway, this guy, he contacted the Forrest Fenn estate and he said, just curious, because he doesn't really trust them. Sorry. He was kind of like, could you tell me what cancer fund that money is going to? And this lady, I think he contacted the lady who sold the books. I forget what her name is at the bookstore. She goes, oh, well, that's one of the... Sorry, folks, part 3 coming up, and unfortunately, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to go on to part 3.